Hi, I'm Veronica Lee, and I wanted to share a little bit about how to take care of ourselves in a human way. So, in other words, when I work with people, I find that many of us are very awake in the higher realms, right? We are intuitive, we feel really connected to Source, we are maybe in touch with our essence and our gifts out there. What I have found is that many people who are on the path to enlightenment are actually already enlightened, and what they're having a hard time with is bringing that energy and that enlightenment into their bodies. So I want to share a little on taking care of our physical bodies. This is a very old idea through any of the 12-step programs, and they talk a lot about HALT. So never let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. When we get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, we often find ourselves more irritable. We find that we can be more depressed. We find that we are running out of so-called gas, that we can't move forward or do anything. So it's important, of course, to stick with those fundamentals. So to be self-aware of our physical bodies, which is a little bit tricky in and of itself for people who tend to be living up here, is the first step to self-care. So if you are struggling with hunger, what I recommend, and for many of us, food can be a little bit tricky. In other words, maybe we don't eat a lot of meat, or maybe we aren't doing gluten foods, or maybe we don't do fast foods. So it can be a little tricky to keep foods near you that feel rich and nourishing, and that maybe offer the protein that you need. So personally, I carry nuts with me, whether they are almonds or walnuts. I also will do dried fruit, but I generally try to have a snack around so that I'm not getting to those points where I'm just having my low blood sugar and freaking out. The other thing I like is at the grocery store, they'll have the little rice wraps. They're not rice, sorry, it's rice paper. And so it's not sushi, it's the rice paper, sort of a Vietnamese or a spring roll, right? It's not fried, but in it are vegetables, and sometimes they'll have meat. And those you can make at home. So rather than driving through a fast food, I'll often do a grocery store run like that when I need something a little more nourishing. Of course, there are all kinds of alternative chips out there, whether they are kale chips or vegetable chips. Those can also work for you. So I suggest that you make sure that you are eating on a regular basis, and even if it's just a little touch-in point every 2 to 3 hours, so that you really feel like you're taking care of your physical body. Anger is a little bit tricky because sometimes anger will just kind of hit us, right? We won't realize that we've been slightly feeling a little off or a little bit down, and all of a sudden maybe somebody will cut us off, and then we just explode. So what's happening as we are really awakening to who we are, a lot of our stuff, let's say the things that we aren't, those energies that make us feel less than, or jealous, or inadequate, or frustrated with what's going on out there, are really this stuff of us that is trying to purge, that is trying to come out. What happens is when we get triggered and we don't let it be processed in a healthy way, then of course the explosive anger shows up. And anger is not necessarily a bad thing. However, if we don't do anything with it, for example, if we just suppress it, don't say anything, grit our teeth, we can have some not just only emotional issues, but we can start to be affected physically as well. So if we are constantly gritting our teeth and we go to bed angry, then of course we can start to have some jaw issues. If we don't say what we want to say, then all of a sudden we're exploding at someone, which could be an issue in terms of your interaction with that person. And if it's somebody you don't know and they are also angry, it could also, turn violent, obviously. So by really working and being in tune with our anger, it helps us find ways that can not only find the heart of what's really going on, but it can also show us directions to move through that. So for example, I recommend doing journaling. I recommend speaking with friends, really having a place that you can vent. I will say that you may not want to use the same friend all the time, or if that friend is a dear friend, make sure that you're spending your time also with that friend, sharing your positive parts of life, so that they don't just get you when you're like exploding and frustrated and needing to vent. So by being able to work in these ways, in healthy ways, you can really get in touch with your anger and understand yourself a little more clearly, and hopefully start to shift those energies to self-love. So of course, I would recommend a therapist as well. I highly recommend that, but I'm also looking for ways to support you that are less costly, perhaps. So the other is lonely. When we get lonely, we tend to isolate ourselves even more than we might, or we tend to shut ourselves out, right? It's sort of like the world isn't seeing me, I'm not feeling accepted, and so what'll happen is we will often close ourselves down more because we want to protect our hearts, and we don't want to be hurt by anybody else or anymore. Again, another thing I've seen with very awake people is that if you think about when we were born and the families that we were born into, they were pretty standard, right? They were pretty mainstream for most of us, and we weren't necessarily seen and accepted for who we were. And in essence, this made us feel very different and alone, even within our families. Then we go off to school, and the teachers are saying, don't do this, don't do that, and we are then feeling like we're not able to do the right thing, or we have to stay in line in a certain way. And then perhaps at these awkward ages, children might be not very nice to one another, and so we again start to feel shut out. What happens is that we end up creating so many layers of protectedness around ourselves that we, in essence, start to just really own the loneliness. What we try to do is, of course, connect with others, and sometimes we may not have the skills or the confidence to do so in healthy ways. Generally speaking, let's just say that you aren't feeling necessarily lonely on a regular basis. If you get to that point of feeling lonely, it may trigger something bigger because of these other feelings. So sometimes loneliness can make us feel as if we are being victimized by somebody else, like they're excluding us, but many times it's we ourselves who are excluding us because we've built so many layers around ourselves. So by helping us recognize those layers, we can start to move beyond them, start to let them disintegrate a little bit. In an everyday sort of way, maybe you look at ways that you connect and that you try to reach out and that you are aware of your own little shields. So if you are trying to connect with other people and you feel like nobody's answering your calls, you can take that personal, or you can realize that maybe people are really busy. So if you start to really hone in on what's causing the loneliness, is it something that's a very old thing that's triggered, or is it somebody's behavior, and is it about me, or is it just something that's even deeper than that? So really I recommend doing some deep breathing, just coming into your center. I recommend doing some meditation, and then I recommend opening your heart inwardly to yourself, to the divine, and to all beings, so that you can start to really eliminate those filters that you have on that keep people away. And then, of course, getting too tired can make us all a little bit crabby, right? We can't necessarily operate out of just 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Unfortunately, a lot of people feel that they have the need to keep going and going and going, or there's deadlines, or there's just not enough time in the day. And ideally, if we can sleep within a moderate amount of time, within a nice range, Deepak Chopra recommends between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. is an ideal sleep time. And of course, some people may need more, some may need less. But when I did read that, it feels really good to me to be able to use that as my own guide. Otherwise, I may push myself, stay up later. And then, of course, taking naps. And the other thing I want to say is that as we are really moving into these higher states of consciousness, it is very much like a baby who is growing. And when babies grow, they use a lot of energy just to grow from, 1 month to the next and day to day. And all they have time to do is sleep, sleep, and more sleep, right? And so if you're feeling as if there's a lot of shifting and changing going on, you may need more sleep. So really, if you can, honor that. So the last thing I want to say is that by taking care of our physical selves, by really bringing the enlightened stage into our physical bodies, right? We are really anchoring it, bringing it more fully for ourselves, which if you look at it just in a sort of metaphysical way, you're bringing this light of who you are, through these higher states of consciousness into this knowing, okay, I recognize, I see, I get, I understand, right? And then through that body, through that canal of enlightened beingness, that column, I should say. And as it comes through and opens up our heart, that's like, okay, we've hit this point where I'm feeling a little more connected to another. And then what we want to do is continue to bring that down through ourselves, through our bodies, allowing for self-care and allowing for recognition that we are, human beings after all. We may be spiritual beings, but we are having to take care of these human bodies. And then once we bring it all the way through, what happens is it really anchors into the earth. And in a vibrational way, what it does is it brings in these frequencies of who you really are, this amazing bright being, in through your body and anchoring it into the earth, which then serves as an infusement of pure love of you with the earth, connecting in. And of course, doing things like gardening and really getting connected to the earth, being in nature, are also ways to create that connection. So again, just wanting to share information and ideas around how to really take care of your physical selves as you expand into your spiritual journey and who you really are. Thank you.